Hello, my dear friends from a UK Chinese International Music Festival. I'm very honored to be invited to this program. And I think music connects the world. And today, I would like to talk about my career, which is very boring and serious. So I thought to invite my ma petite chérie et mon petit oiseau, my daughter Florian, to redo my old website, and which I'm very grateful, and she has done a great job. And I'm sure you have some questions to ask. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I had a lot of fun making your website.
Oh, I'm honored.
I obviously, saw all your stories, and I know kind of the sequence of events, but I don't really know how you sort of got from point A to point B. So I have so many questions. Yeah, I think we should go through all the archives and kind of.
I'm ready.
Yeah. Okay, so you were born in 1963.
Yes,
right?
Indeed.
So I really love these baby photos of you. And so I just wanted to know, like, what was it like to grow up during the Cultural Revolution in China? And like, how did you start playing violin? How did you get into it?
You see, I was born 3 years before the Cultural Revolution. And that time I remember, actually, Ye was inspired. Ye is her granddad, so I have to translate. Ye was inspired by one of his pupils' father, because he was taking lesson from Ye. And suddenly the father say, well, you have been teaching my son, but what about your son, And Kun, he's not doing anything yet. And suddenly Ye said, okay, why not? So I think Ye borrowed a small toy violin. That is not the proper violin, actually.
Oh,
the one
right.
you saw. Yeah, it's not even the smallest. This one is toy, from a colleague of his in the Sichuan Conservatory. And then that's how I started to, just to play like a toy instead. But this one was later. Later on, I started to maybe learn a little bit properly, So yeah,
Right.
I remember those moments. It was a beautiful time. In Ye and I always teaching at home, They always have students come in.
In Chengdu, right?
In Chengdu, in the Sichuan Conservatory of Music. So we basically brought up in a conservatory. The Chinese conservatory is like a little city, like a university city, compared with here, university campus, whatever you call it. So we live inside, all the students, teacher, everybody lives in the same
That's so nice.
massive campus.
It's like a little community.
Exactly. It's a big community. We have got our own surgery,
Oh, right.
own,
Really?
all the services, and the canteen, and the big football pitch in the middle. So yeah, it's very sufficient, self-sufficient.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, great. So then, in 1970, you had your debut on stage with your mother. Is that right? With my grandmother.
Yes,
Yeah.
Nai Nai. And you know what? Actually, I love piano.
Yeah.
Ever since I was born, I always watched Nai Nai. I still have this picture that Nai Nai was playing. This we call it eight exemplar music, 8 exemplar theater in those days. You're not allowed to play Western music, but you're only allowed to perform 8 exemplar music. And Nai Nai was doing it on the piano, and I still remember Nai Nai's hand above me, which I was crawling,
Yeah, you were still so young.
underneath, and watching her finger floating on the top, But then this picture was taken on our first performance.
You look like quite angry or sad or something. How
Wait,
come?
there's a story behind this. The reason why, because you see, I had this red scarf. It's called a pioneer, in the Chinese pioneer. And then the school actually sent me to represent the school to play this piece called the Red Guard, going to Beijing to see Mao Zedong, those days. So Nai Nai accompanied me. And although I love piano, but my hand's a little bit small. So Ye said, oh, well, you play a little bit piano, but then it's better when your hand is not that big, it's better you play the violin. So that's why I became a violinist more than pianist, So that day, the reason why my face looked a bit severe is because at the last minute, can you imagine when the curtain was open and then when I saw the dark audience packed, I got so scared. And I said, Nai Nai, Mommy, I'm not going. And Nai Nai was shocked. She said, what? We prepare all this time. You have to go. You have to go. I said, no, I'm not going on the stage. And I was frightened. And then she really pushed me. So that moment
she pushed you on stage?
She pushed me physically.
Really?
Go, you have to go.
Oh my goodness.
The lights are up and everyone's there. So she pushed me. So that's why you see my mouth is, facing to the sky. Yeah, but I managed from that day. Yeah.
So then you ended up in Beijing after Chengdu, and it looks like you're performing in the army.
That was still a little struggle between this and that, because in my hometown, it used to be a provincial city. Chengdu is the capital of Sichuan province. Sichuan is the size of France. So that's the capital, but we are like, 4,000 kilometers away from Beijing. So that means culture-wise, for music, especially for Western music, we are absolutely like in the desert, like in the mountain, let's call it this way. So the only performance I heard was Yeye Nanai. Yeye plays violin, Nanai plays piano. That was the best live performance I could have in my childhood, throughout my childhood. But then one day, Nanai was listening to me practicing the violin while she was preparing, or she was doing the laundry by hand in the kitchen. And she heard I was practicing the Paganini violin concerto. Those days, a 13 years old, I think I was 12 years old boy in the remote region of China playing the Paganini, which is the guru of violin, the virtuoso of the violin, and the concerto. So Nanai was very, according to what she told me later on, she was very shocked. She said, this boy should not stay in this place. So she realized, and Sichuan was too closed. But now if you go to Chengdu, it's just like skyscrapers everywhere. It's like a modern city, But those days was really, we haven't not even seen a foreigner, can you imagine?
Wow.
Yeah, not even alone the Western musician, yeah? So Nanai said, okay, I have an idea. I have an ex-bassoon teacher. She used to play bassoon in Beijing, and who is a member of the Central Philharmonic Orchestra in China. Central Philharmonic Orchestra is almost like when you say Berlin Philharmonic, Chinese version of Berlin Philharmonic, or Chinese version of London Symphony, And imagine I'm from a tiny village in England, And I say, oh my God, that's fantastic. So she said, okay, I'm gonna ask him to take you on a journey of 3 months to explore the world.
Wow.
To open my eye, because she realized I have reached the limit while I was studying with Yeye, and Yeye told me everything he knows. I studied with Yeye 8 years, 7 years. And then I was sent on this holiday visit to Beijing and stayed in the Central Conservatory. This man, my mother's ex-bassoon teacher called Liu Qi, they took me like their own child, But the first day, I think they were quite skeptical about this little boy, wearing really, outdated clothes compared with the people in Beijing, because Beijing is still the capital of China. And I remember the clothes I wear when I went to Beijing was actually made by Nanai by hand. Really? It was handmade, yeah.
Wow.
So you can tell that, for us it's already very fashionable in Chengdu, but when you go to Beijing, suddenly you realize you're like from countryside, So I think they didn't pay much attention, but the funny thing happened that evening. I was practicing, and afterwards they say, oh, actually we have got the Central Philharmonic tonight, they're rehearsing, would you like to go to the rehearse? I was so scared, oh my God, what is orchestra? And it's the first time I'm going to listen to a symphony orchestra rehearsing. So I was so excited. But by the time I arrived at the hall, and some of my mother's teacher said, hey, Liu Qi, what records were you playing last night at your home? And Liu Qi said, no, we didn't play any records. But there was a violin recording, and suddenly rings Liu Qi's bell, and he said, but there's only one possibility. There was a little boy from Sichuan. And maybe I was, what? So from that very day, everybody come to Liu Qi's house. Every night I remember open the door, 20 people, 30 people waiting outside. They want to come to listen and then later on they call it a later genius from Sichuan.
Yeah.
Because Sichuan was so remote, those days. So that's how people said, okay, as the word spread to the music circle in Beijing. So that's why some people just suggested, why don't you take a job in Beijing? And then we said, if you have a job in Beijing, then you can stay in Beijing, you can study with the best teacher. So that picture you saw, I was with uniform. That was a crazy story happened because first I was invited by Central Radio Symphony Orchestra in Beijing. And I remember they drove this Warsaw car, for the group leaders or for the heads of the radio. And then they came to invite me to go to play for them for the audition. They want to hear me playing. Immediately after my audition, I remember packed, the whole orchestra was there, and plus the director of the radio. They say, we're going to give you a job as a soloist of the Central Radio Symphony Orchestra. And then I was like, oh my God, that's great, So, but the trouble is next day, two directors flew by plane to my hometown. Those days, somebody go with planes, just unthinkable. With the stamps of the letter from the Chinese radio. Can you imagine? It was very powerful radio. It's like a stamp from BBC, and go to get my documents, but has been refused by Yehudi Conservatory because those days their children was not encouraged to become dragon, and to become a soloist. And you're supposed to go to countryside to work like a farmer, which was a good idea, I think. The idea was Mao Zedong was putting everybody together and in the same level. The communist idea was everyone should be equal, and even intellectuals should be able to, make rice, and grow rice and, be doing what the farmer is supposed to do. The idea is good, but I think we had our own skills. Obviously we couldn't really continue, So this was one of escape that I could go to Beijing. So they couldn't get me from the Central Radio Orchestra, and they were refused. So at the end they failed to get my paper to be in Beijing. And then suddenly there was a group called the National Defense Military Artist Group. They formed. They say, okay, we can get you to Beijing with a military order. So I had the power to just order all my paper overnight.
That's amazing.
Because of the head of the ministry and the national defense, and he loves music. He just loves talent. He heard about me.
So that's how you ended up playing for the troops.
That's why ended up as a soloist.
As
they
a
invited me
soloist,
as a soloist of the group. So those pictures you saw, for instance, that one on the top. Actually, I was playing on the train.
Okay.
We had the first tour in Xinjiang, which is 4,000 kilometers from Beijing, 4 days and 4 nights.
Wow, that must have been fun.
I was playing for the chef, for the cook in the canteen.
And you were the youngest member,
I was
right?
the youngest member. I was only 13 years old. Yeah, if you notice my jacket, the uniform, I have got 4 pockets. Why? Because normally for the soldier, you only have 2 pockets. And 4 pockets for officers.
Oh, really?
So they ranked me as an officer.
Wow.
So you can imagine I passed through the troops, everyone has to salute to me. Because I had the 4 pockets, they had only 2,
Wow.
Even I was only 13 years old.
Wow.
Yeah.
After studying with your father, you had a second teacher, Professor Lin Yaoji.
Yes.
So how did you meet?
There was actually a film in China. It's called Together With You. And it has been nominated by Oscar.
Really?
In 2002, I think. Yeah, it's called Together With You by Chen Kaige, quite well-known Chinese director. And that story, I think, is pretty much what happened with me and Ye. So what happened was, as I was in Beijing, I went to the military artist group, and then Ye came over for a visit. And he was asking me, so are you happy in Beijing? Did you find a good teacher? Of course, the family where I stayed, they found me a wonderful man, I still remember his name, Xiong Tiansheng, he was a wonderful violinist from the Central Philharmonic. And he agreed to take me as a student. But the only thing I told Ye, I said, well, I like him and his wife. They took me like their own child. But the only thing is, every single lesson, he's happy. I remember every single lesson, he's, oh, wonderful, you play really well, so let's play a new piece. So at the end I realized, I told Ye, I think I need somebody tough. I won't be better, so I need somebody, really tough to me, and not happy with what I'm playing, because I'm not happy with myself, So and then one day, Ye came to the group, he stayed with me in the group, he said, Kun, you know what I did today? And I said, no idea. He said, I went to knock Professor Lin Yaoji's door. Just like that, without any announcement.
Yeah.
So why? This is one of the greatest Chinese teacher who was studied in Moscow in the Tchaikovsky Conservatory during the 60s. He was sent by Chinese government. And he happened to study with one of the top Russian violinists, guru, called Yuri Yankelevich, who produced all these super Russian violinist stars. He studied with him for 2 years. And then he came back to China, and we have heard about his name, But the only problem is we didn't know who was his, best student. We didn't know. But we just know, we heard, oh, he's fantastic, he's good. And so I said, that would be my dream, to be able to study with him. I think Ye got the vibe from me, So he just went one night, just knocked his door. Said, I've got a son, and who's playing the violin, and what's your son's name? And he said, son's name is Kun. He said, oh, actually, I've heard about him. So those days, already in 1976, in the Beijing music circle, they already heard about this little boy from Sichuan. So I was so happy the first time I went to their house, and he heard me, and then he said, okay, you're talented, but this is not good, that is not good, this. So we had a list of things needs to be improved. So I was very fortunate that I got him as my next teacher after 7 years to be with Ye.
Amazing. So after Beijing, you ended up in Helsinki, right? And this is when you won the 5th prize of the Sibelius Competition. So this is kind of when your career kind of snowballed, right? This is when it all started, kind of?
I wouldn't say snowballed, but it's definitely a
big moment.
A landmark.
Yeah,
a landmark. Why? Because those days, China was still communist country. It was just still during the Cultural Revolution, and the country was closed. So nobody is allowed to go freely from China. Only you have to be sent by officials status to be abroad. And what happened was, while I was studying with Professor Lin, suddenly I heard there was a Sibelius International Violin Competition to be held in Helsinki for the 4th time. And China is going to send official candidates, like you send to national team to Olympics, Because what happened was China started to open up after Mao Zedong's death in 76, September. So China started to open up, and then they decided we're going to join the international community. So they decided to have a selective competition twice in China. It's very serious, twice in China, to send the candidates to join this Sibelius Violin Competition. So the first time it was in Beijing. That was for the northern section. And I remember it was so many people that I admired. Those days, all these heroes, many of my heroes, they were going to do it. So, and then another section was for Shanghai, it was for the southern part of China. And so then I asked my teacher, I said, can I do this selective competition? But my teacher just took me on. It was, the selective competition was in 79, but I only went to him 77. So he just took me on. He said, oh, well, I've got this and that, because that was the first generation of super players came out after the Cultural Revolution closed down, because it closed for 10 years. Nobody allowed to go to conservatory apart from the soldiers and the peasants and the workers, children. They are only allowed to go to conservatory. But then suddenly they opened in 79. So in 1977, the standard for entrance of the conservatory was incredibly high. I mean, I was in the army, I just heard, oh, so-and-so, oh my God, and who can play 10 concertos by memory, and the other one can do 24 caprices by memory, you know, or just all these words there. I couldn't even play one or two, you know. But then three, I think, of the top students end up in Professor Lin's class. So he was saying, "Oh, Kun, you're only 15, you know, you're still too young, and I have this and that, you know, who was a superb violinist from this, you know, examination, and so maybe you have your chance later on, you know." But then my colleague from the this National Defense Artist Group, and he said, "Kun, you have to persuade your teacher to let you do it. Why? Because you're the only one representing the Army Artist Group," which makes sense, because everyone is from everywhere else. And then I went back to my teacher and see what my friend said, and finally he was kind of reluctant.
Like convinced, yeah.
Do it. You know?
Fine then.
then fine then, exactly. Do it. So we had 8 candidates competing, and it turned out I beat all of them.
Wow.
So I won it. I won the northern section, and they were much older than me. They were like 18 and 24 oldest. So and then the year after, it was 1980. It was the year when we were supposed to go to Finland. We had the national selected competition. Can you imagine how serious that? First selected competition, north and south, and then you put together. So finally, we joined the national competition. So 4 best one from Beijing, from northern part of China, 4 best one from southern part of China, put together 8, compete. But that competition I did badly. I think I was too nervous. And also that day I remember it was in March or something, it was really cold. You know, I had to prepare at the back of the stage for 3 hours, and they delayed, and then plus I was hearing people playing before me, you know, I got kind of nervous, you know. So and then I didn't play well. That day I was in bad shape, you know. So at the end we were so disappointed, you know. Can you imagine, we're just one step closer to join the international competition in Finland. And so me and Ye, we just came home and really down and said, okay, whatever, you know. And at least we had a good experience. So by the time we went back to the group, and we kind of like really down. But suddenly the telephone rang. In those days, there's no private telephone. The whole building of our artist troupe has only one phone at the corner, at the end of the corner. Somebody shouted, "Kun, you have got a phone call." Me and Ye, we just kind of go there. We didn't know what was it, you know. And then we just pick up the phone, and on the other side was my teacher, Professor Lin. "Kun still number 1.
Really? Wow.
Me and Ye was, what? We came home, and then immediately Ye played the tape he taped during the competition. He played again. We listened to it again. Despite all the mistake I did, he said, no, you deserve it. You deserve it. So 1 minute ago, we were done, and another second. So at the end, China sent 4 candidates to the Sibelius Violin Competition in 1980. So I was one of them, and as the first one. And then, obviously, me and my teacher, me and Yi, you know, everyone, the pianist and everybody worked so hard. You know, I imagine during the summer, you know, sometimes I came by bicycle, on my bicycle for 3 hours, you know, and then I come into, 1 hour by bicycle in the hot summer, and then go in, my teacher say, okay, because you're small, you're thin, you know, we need a power, we need stamina, because this competition is very difficult, one of the most difficult competition in the world, prestige. And you have to play 3 rounds. First round, classical repertoires, and the second round, the romantic repertoires, so big pieces, you know, big virtuoso pieces. And then the last round, you have to play 2 violin concerto. So you have to play Sibelius, obviously, Sibelius Violin Concerto. You have to play Sibelius Concerto, with lasting half an hour. And you have to choose your own concerto, which I chose Tchaikovsky, famous violin concerto, lasting 45 minutes.
That's long.
Yeah, so you have to play 2 nights, one after another.
Do you play by memory, or do you have?
Everything by memory,
really?
Everything.
Wow.
Apart from the contemporary piece, they allowed you to play with music, because they commission a piece for the competition, I think 2 pieces. And then that one you can play, you're allowed to put it by memory. But the rest of them, everything, you know, by memory, and then without music. So, and then I remember I was so excited being sent the first time I think that was the first time I took airplane even. I've never been on a plane. And the first time being outside of China with my teacher. We had a national team. I remember the leader, the head of the string of Central Conservatory. We had an official pianist from Shanghai. And then we had my teacher as observers, as an observer, my teacher those days. And we had 3 candidates. And one of them gave up and she went to States. So we had 3 candidates. So that was our national team sent to the Sibelius Violin Competition. And the whole world was shocked because they have never seen international violin competition. There was a Chinese national team, you know. Yeah. I remember the first day was quite intimidating, you know. We arrived at the Sibelius Conservatory in Finland. And I mean, I couldn't speak good language, you know. Suddenly I realized our clothes, everything is behind the West, at least 30 or 40 years, maybe 50 years even, you know? So all the clothes I wear was made by my friends, and a friend of mine needed my pullover, you know, another friend made my jacket, you know, and there was a picture, I think even on the website, that you see all the European candidates with elegant jackets, you know, ties, and, you know, so those days we realized we're not in the same world, not in the same level, you know, and we have to compete with all of them. So I was like, okay. And I never forget, my teacher told me before we go, he said, Kun, don't worry. If we could get to the second round, we're already great. That was our aim, not to be knocked out the first round.
Yeah.
You know? So I say, okay, so we practice so hard, first round, second round. So as a result, the final, we didn't work that hard. Because once you're in the final, my teacher said, once you're in the final, you're already one of 8 prize winner, because there are 8 prizes, only 8 people out of that year was 70 something, you know, candidates from all over the world. Wow. And to get into the final. So once you're in the final, who cares?
Really
you know,
big deal.
The worst you get to the number 8, you
yeah,
know?
that's
so
pretty good.
That's why we practiced the first round really hard. But what was shocked us was after the first round, everybody came to us. I remember all these old ladies, you know, and girls, and you know, they all with tears, because I finished my Mozart's D major violin concerto Adagio, you know, on the piano, and they came with tears, and we couldn't quite understand, because you know we haven't been abroad, and I've never seen foreigners, you know. So why I was they say, you cannot imagine, you know, how beautiful was your Mozart. There was exactly, I still have this vivid picture of these people coming to us, and from that day, everybody was following us. Everywhere we go, they were following us. Like they were maybe music lovers or students from conservatory, you know. So we made a lot of friends. And then we just managed not only to the second round, and then I got in the final, and to be one of the 8 candidates, prize winner basically, you know. So I remember that moment. It was just amazing, and my teacher was so scared. He wouldn't even let me carry my own violin. Do you know why?
Why?
Because my host family lives maybe only 200 meters from the venue, you know?
Yeah.
Because it's very icy. It was before Christmas. It was in December. So full of ice. He was so scared. I tripped over because...
If you break any fingers.
Yeah, exactly. I went all this way, 1,000
yeah.
kilometers plus. I got into the final. Imagine I broke my finger.
Yeah.
So he carried my violin, I remember very well. And believe me or not, those days, I only played once with orchestra before I left. I never played with orchestra because those days we didn't have so many orchestras in China. And it was a friend of my teacher who organized Central Opera House Symphony Orchestra, and a very well-known Chinese conductor, lady conductor called Zheng Xiaoying, who also studied on the same trip with my teacher in Moscow in the 60s. And she conducted once. And my teacher said, at least you must have a feel. You know, what does it feel when you play with symphony orchestra, because it's a concerto, you know? And so just in case, he said, just in case you go to the final. So I was very fortunate got in the final. And then that moment, I didn't even know how to bow to the audience. I remember after my performance, everyone was cheering, you know, and playing in Finlandia, which was a very modern contemporary concert hall for 3,000 seats. Everyone was cheering, and I didn't know where to bow. I bought at the back of the orchestra. Can you imagine? I didn't even know that I have to go to the front because I have never played with orchestra.
No one teaches you that stuff. Like
we haven't experienced that, you know. So there were so many things we didn't know. But one thing I remember incredibly well was that the Chinese government actually spent, according to my memory, $20,000. Some people say this was wrong, but I remember my teacher told me $20,000 bought 4 European instruments, 4 Italian violin, Chinese Cultural Ministry. 4 Italian violin. Later on we found out actually quite well-known violin, like 2 Gallianos and Violinist. You know, they are not that big name, but they are quite well-known, you know. For us, I remember each performance, each practicing afterwards, I have a safe on the top of my head, you know. I have to lock it up.
Yeah.
So, and then also they bought the strings, like Italian strings, you know, Pirasto, you know, very, very expensive strings and gut strings, and for us to use for the national team in those days, you know. Those days China was very poor, you know. China hasn't been developed. But I was impressed for that, you know. So, but of course, once we arrived in Finland, people before me, Victoria Mulova, who won the first prize, played the Stradivarius from a Russian National Museum, you know. We were against that, you know, range of instruments, so it was no way to compete with them. But luckily I came out 5th. 5th
prize.
Yes, and I was the youngest candidate.
Yeah. Very impressive.
Yeah, competing with people in the 20s.
17, right? You were 17?
I was 17,
yeah.
And then the oldest winner was 32. You know.
Wow. So you then went to study in Gstaad, Switzerland.
So what happened was after the Sibelius competition, that's why I say early on, it's not just a snowball. Because after the Sibelius competition, they call me a black horse, whatever it was on the newspaper. They didn't expect it was a Chinese guy, 17 years old, came out and, you know, won the 5th. So as a national team, we had to return to China. Because those days, we can't really travel freely, so I have to go back to China. And then I was, another time in 81, I was also sent by Chinese government to play in Spain. I remember I was my second trip to be abroad. We went to Granada, we went to Madrid. And then after that, I went back to China. In 84, while I was actually already as a student of a Central Conservatory. And the Central Conservatory asked me whether I would like to study with Yehudi Menuhin, but not with him, but it's at the Yehudi Menuhin Academy in Switzerland, in Gstaad, you know, but sent by government. But that time I was already doing a private study channel to go to study in States, in Bloomington, in Indiana, Bloomington, you know, to study with one of the Sibelius competition jury called Joseph Gingold, and he was one of the most well-known concert master of time when famous Toscanini was the director of New York Philharmonic, you know. So then he was trying to help me to go to study in States with him. But then suddenly this opportunity came. And I remember I hesitated, you know, I thought, oh, should I go to States or should I go to Switzerland and study with Menuhin? And then Ye said, you have to go to Yehudi Menuhin Academy. Yehudi Menuhin is so famous, this and that, you know, and he's the greatest musician, violinist, you know. But I remembered my first encounter with Sir Yehudi Menuhin. It was in '79 while I was doing the selective competition in Beijing. I heard suddenly a friend of mine said, there's a greatest maestro Menuhin is coming to play in Beijing, you know, after Isaac Stern, who was also a very big famous name from States, and who made a film of From Mao to Mozart, and that was a very film, Oscar-winning documentary. But after that, Yehudi Menuhin came, and I said, who is Yehudi Menuhin? Those days I didn't know, because China, we were closed up. We have no records and no information about, you know, all the stars in Europe. And my friend said, what? You don't know who is Yehudi Menuhin? And he was a genius, and this and that. So he started to give me all the information. Say, oh, really? Oh, so finally I heard Yehudi Menuhin is coming to China. I spent 2 days and 1 night with my friend queuing for his ticket.
2 days and 1 night?
Yes, with a little chair, and it was cold with a military clothes. 2 days and 2 nights we queued, because those days you can't just call and buy tickets. You know, you have to physically queue. 2 days and 1 night. We even swapped numbers during the night because it's so cold, So and then I got all his rehearsals, all his concerts in Beijing. And then, except I was in the army. I never shoot it, but I was only playing the violin. But we didn't have chance to play for him. Because what happened was those days, if a famous star coming from abroad, only the conservatory students who was allowed to play for him, who selected. I remember I was sitting in the audience watching those star students playing for Yehudi Menuhin, and I was so impressed. I remember, I never forget this moment when Yehudi played the famous recapitulation of Beethoven Violin Concerto, where you have the theme after cadenza start to repeat. Fa, sol, la, si, do, re, la. With his those days his hands were slightly shaking. Fa, sol, la, si, do, re, la, so, fa, mi, fa, re. He was slightly shaking, but I look at all my audience friends, everybody was tears. That moment, and I never forget. So that was a moment that I first saw Yehudi Menuhin. And then suddenly I got this chance to study with him. My father said, yes, you have to go to study with him. So, but of course I heard that I was not going to study with him personally because I supposed to go to his academy. So he came over for some visit, But still, he said, no, you have to go, even to meet him, So I said, okay. So finally I took the chance.
So you got to play for him still? Or?
Yes, this photo was actually taken
September
'84, just after I arrived from Beijing to Gstaad. And this was the first day, and Yehudi invited me to go to play for him. So on that day, I played one of the most famous pieces, which was dedicated to Yehudi Menuhin, written by Bela Bartok. It's called the Bartok Violin Solo Sonata, which was dedicated to Yehudi Menuhin. So I remember that day, I specifically I want to play this piece for him, and in person.
Yeah.
So that was an unforgettable moment.
I bet.
We had a really personal chance to play in front of him.
As well.
Yeah, I love that photo. And then afterwards, he invited me and my other Chinese student to his chalet in Gstaad.
Wow.
And we went up, and I remember we walked all the way to his chalet, and then he invited us for 2 ducks. 2 ducks with his wife, Lady Diana. We had a wonderful meal with, that was my first real personal contact with Sir Yehudi. Those days he was Sir, not Lord. Yeah.
So in 1985, there was the Queen Elisabeth Competition.
Yes. And
you won the 4th prize and the public prize as well, right? So why did you decide to go to this competition? Yeah,
this is actually quite similar story. I was at the Yehudi Menuhin Academy, and the academy is located in a beautiful place. And it's a small chamber orchestra. It's called Camerata Lisi, And also I studied a little bit with Maestro Lisi as well, who is the director of the Yehudi Menuhin Academy. It's also called the Yehudi Menuhin Academy and Camerata Lisi. Yeah. So as soon as I realized I was already prize winner, I was doing concerts already as a concert soloist, and then suddenly I had to stay in this chamber orchestra and play quite similar pieces each time, And then I didn't quite feel that was what I came to Europe for, because I was hoping after I won the prize and I came to Europe and I have lots of opportunities and to play with a great orchestra, recording, all this, that, but don't get me wrong, I'm not degrading any orchestra musician, because that was just because it didn't fit into my picture of what I was looking for to be in Europe, Although I gained a lot of experience by playing in that little chamber orchestra, I learned a lot. Even to this day, I'm still grateful to Menuhin Academy. But it's not just not, it was my picture in my head. So therefore I said, Kun, I have to create an opportunity for myself to chase my dream, which is become an international soloist. And then I said, okay, there's a biggest competition for violin, which called the Queen Elisabeth Violin Competition, and everybody knows it's one of the most prestigious competition in the world, in Brussels. in May '85 because they rotate every 4 years. Piano, violin, vocal, and conducting now, and composition as well later on. So, and then that year just happened to be violin. Then I approached my teacher, Alberto Lisi. I said, Alberto, because he was going to be in the jury. And he was prize winner as well. I think he got the 7th or 8th, many years ago in the 50s or 60s. And that's how Yehudi Menuhin invited him to be the director of the Menuhin Academy. And then I asked him, I say, Alberto, is there any chance I can do this competition, And I remember again, he said, oh, you just came out from China, you must study really hard, And he said, and so-and-so is ready, and maybe you're not quite ready. But I say, I already got the prize from Sibelius. Yeah. He said, oh, well, that is relatively a small competition, And so I kind of but I say, Alberto, I really want to try this one. Please, let me, And he just kind of I remember asking him for a recommendation letter because everyone needed. He just said, okay, then he just wrote me a recommendation letter. But again, I think I was very fortunate. And despite a very short preparation, only from January '85 and to the competition, which was in May '85, and I managed to got in the final and to be one of 12 candidates. Again, this competition is huge. I think that year we had hundreds candidates and then 12 prize winners. And so I got 4th prize, plus luckily I got the Belgium radio and television prize, first prize. So
is this when you got the train and got kicked out of the train to get there?
That's where you remember that.
I remember that story that you told us, yeah.
Yes, can you imagine that?
What happened?
Okay, what happened was I was practicing 6 or 8 hours a day from January to prepare this competition because the repertoire is massive, And for instance, give you an idea, first round you have to play 30 concerto, one of 30 concerto, but they don't tell you which one. They only tell you 1 month before, while this is only the first round. And then this other round you have to play everything is so many programs to choose from, and you have to play all the Isaïe 6 solo sonata, which is extremely difficult. And so he only tell you 24 hours notice. Or you have to play the whole Bach, suite, and they tell you only, okay, you only play tomorrow, 24 hours notice, you play until this point. So that means what? You have to prepare incredible amount of repertoire. You have to be able to be in your head and ready to be packed one day before. And
That's crazy.
So something like that. So by the time I got into the final, but interesting was okay, let's continue that story. And then I prepared everything to my best possible, okay? The end of the April, that was the day when I had to travel to Brussels with my friend Mi Kyung. Do you remember I was telling you that last minute she didn't want to go on the train? And she said, Kun, I'm not ready. I said, no, we prepared together, let's go together. But the day before I said, okay, I'm going to pick up some cash. I said, Kun, you don't have to. Why? Because we're going to stay with host family. You don't need cash, They're going to look after us. I said, oh, it's an old Chinese tradition. We always carry some cash with us. Then I went to the bank. I took out my whole month's scholarships. And then we went on the train and chatted. We were taking sleep in Guchet all the way to Brussels and had my Belgian visa, And then we chatted when the train left Basel. No, it was Bern. That's why we left from Bern on sleep in Guchet. And then we chatted until after midnight, and we said goodbye, and then we all went back to our cabin and started to sleep. And then sometimes during the night, 2 o'clock or something, bang, 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 I woke up by this massive noise of my cabin.
In the middle of the night, just...
Yeah, I was dreaming, I think, with my pajama, And I opened the door, what happened? Passport, in French, passport. Oh, I realized, okay, maybe it's the border control, So I gave the passport. No good. 2 seconds. No good. I couldn't speak English very well those days. And he was talking with me in French police, I remember. In 2 1 or 2 minutes, all my luggage, everything on the platform, and then train started to leave.
Without Mekyung, just on your own.
And Mekyung was on the train.
Yeah.
And I remember she was waving, Kun! I said, Mekyung, what happened? And I was with my pajama and violin, and you don't have the visa. And then I couldn't hear her anymore. So I answered, I don't have the visa. But I say, I have one. I have Belgium visa,
So what did you do? Because
No,
the competition was like the next day or something, or
next 3 days.
next 3 days, yeah.
And then I just didn't realize. I don't even know where I was. Was I in Switzerland or was I in another country? I have no idea about the, Europe geographically, So I knew maybe I thought I was in France already. No, I thought I was in Belgium already. But then I looked at the clock. It was only 2 o'clock in the morning, so it can't be. Then I walked around in the dark. It was still dark, end of April, snowing, very cold. And then it says Basel. I say, what? After all these hours, I'm still in Basel, still in Switzerland. Basically, I didn't even cross the border. Asked the police what happened. The police said, this is, so I realized maybe, they said, you need a transit visa. So what happened was the train was going all the way to Brussels Midi station, and my host family was excited, waiting to pick me up 7:30 in the morning. They told me the night before. And then train has to go through France. So even despite I was sleeping, I was supposed to sleep through France and arrive Belgium. I had a visa,
So
and
you
then
need a visa to
visa
go through France, right?
For my sleep. Can you imagine?
Oh. So then how did you get there in the end?
So at the end, I was desperate. I said, okay, finished. All my preparation gone, and she's there, and Mekyung is there. I'm still in Belgium. And then I waited until the morning, 5 o'clock. The day lights start to come, and then I went outside of the station. I was thinking, there's only one way. Suddenly I thought, there's only one way. Take airplane, because if I go by plane, I can go over France. I don't have to go through France, That's it. I said to myself, okay, let's get a plane ticket.
Yeah.
And then 5 o'clock in the morning, everything is closed, I would look at all the shops and outside the Basel train station, closed. And then there was a tourist office, closed. And then I was told, there was a Labor Day.
Labor Day.
Labor Day,
Yeah.
Labor Day, that's right. 3 days, Switzerland, all of Switzerland closed.
Such bad timing.
Yeah, bad timing, just bad luck, basically.
Everything just so that
everything
you don't
went
go.
wrong. So at the end, I said, okay, at least I had an idea, yeah? But just at this moment, there was somebody around me, was looking at me, I noticed there was someone. He said, are you all right, I saw somebody, I said, and then obviously I said, no, and started to use my sign language because my English wasn't good, And I said, I'm a musician, violinist, and I say, he said, what are you doing here? He was asking, what are you doing here? He looked at me with pajama and the violin. And then I said, I need to go to Belgium, Brussels. And I need to fly. Show him everything, fly, And then he said, oh, you mean airport? Yes, airport, please, He said, I drive you. Can you imagine?
That's so lucky.
Yeah. He just told me, I drive
So he just drove you to the airport?
I said, what? I have no second thoughts, 5 o'clock in the morning.
Because that's quite dangerous at 5 in the morning getting
No,
to a stranger's
I
car.
Anything can take me to Brussels.
Yeah,
even
you're
balloon,
just desperate.
Even a balloon, even joking, I would do it,
Yeah.
Because I practiced all these months, otherwise all down to the drain, So then I say, let's do it. And he took me. He drove me all the way to Brussels, to Basel airport, a tiny airport, So on the way, I found out he was a doctor, actually, And he just dropped someone at the train station. So he just saw this Chinese guy and standing there with his pajama and violin. He said he just surprised
It's
why I
just
was
meant
there.
to be.
And then I go to the airport. Luckily, there was only one counter open, and they do have a flight, charter flight, tiny flight to go to Brussels with propeller. Little plane, only 8 seats or something, you know. And I took out my cash.
The cash that you took out the day before.
Out the day before. Can you imagine if I didn't have that finished? Because those days we don't have a credit card or anything, you know. So I bought with my whole month's scholarships to the plane tickets, and then all the way. I was only a couple of hours later. They're supposed to pick him up at 7:30 in the morning. I arrived like 10:30. Only a couple of hours. But the funny thing was, my friend, my host family, Francis Michel, in Brussels, they told me they came on time, 7:30 in the morning, to Brussels Midi station, waiting for this Chinese guy with long hair, even longer than this now, come down with a violin. And there was only a Korean lady came down. Mi Kyung, my friend. And they start to talk. You say, are you waiting for Kun? Yes, we are Kun's family, and you know, where is he? He's still in Switzerland. so the whole thing just they realized, you know, and then they were so down, they were just hopeless, and then they went back home. But by the time they got home, they got a call from the airport. Kun, where are you? You know, and probably they saw that I'm still in Basel. No, I'm in Brussels. What? So they came all the way to the train station. Yeah. And the most important in this competition, Sir Yehudi Menuhin heard me for the first time on stage.
Oh, right.
So he only came for the final. He didn't come the first 2 rounds. And he was in the jury in the final. So that was the first time he heard me performing on the stage. And he said I should have won. I remember, even before I met him, he said I should have won. And then, therefore, he invited me to his competition called the Yehudi Menuhin Competition in Paris 3 months later in September. So I took his invitation. And that's how I had, you know, courage to ask him to be his private student. And then this
yeah, we're going to talk about that later.
How we end up, I end up in London.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So throughout your career, you've met some quite high-profile celebrities, I would say, including Ronald Reagan, Christopher Lee, Andrew Sachs. I mean, there's a whole list of them, and also Madame Chirac. So how did you meet her? And also, you ended up getting the title Grand Lauréat de la Ville de Paris. So how did that happen?
This is where I remember very well after my performance of a Sibelius Violin Competition, and I saw 8 jury members stood up, standing ovation. This is the first time I went to 8 international competitions. I never saw jury member. Usually they are sitting there, you know, with a cigar. But they stood up.
Standing ovation.
Yeah, including Yehudi. And then Yehudi came to me. He said, that was the most beautiful Sibelius violin concerto I ever heard, he told me. And then I took my chance. I said, well, is there any possibility, because I saw him, he was so impressed, that I could become, I'm trying to say, if I could study with him, you know? But I didn't know how, because I was on official scholarships in his academy, and he lives in London, he has house in several places. But I didn't know how to make this happen. Suddenly, out of my improvisation, I said, becoming your private student.
Wow.
So I invented, basically. I mean, he never took any student, you know. And I thought immediately he would give me a very polite reply. He say, "Oh well, yeah, you know, I'm too busy or something." You know, he will find an excuse not to give me an answer. But then I look at his eye, and he looked at me. It was a pause. So I was like, you know, and then I realized he didn't answer me straight away. He said, "Let me think about it." My heart was like pumping, you know, and then I was like, "What? You know, it looks like it's possible."
Yeah.
And then few weeks later, I received this letter, which is on my website, that he would try everything possible to bring me to London to work with him personally.
So that's how you arrived in London.
That's how I end up here.
Like 30 years
here.
Ago, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that was a very memorable experience.
Okay, so this is one of my favorite stories. You recorded in Abbey Road Studios.
Yes.
Yeah, so obviously so many legendary artists have recorded there, and so many legendary records have been made there. So it must have been such a treat to be able to record in Studio One with Sir Yehudi Menuhin.
Yeah, it's actually, it was an accident. So originally I was not planned to make this recording. I think it was one of Yehudi's very last. Yehudi later on, after violin, become a great violinist, he started to conduct. This was one of his very last performing recording he has done. It meant to be Bach triple concerto. Yehudi is the first violin, Alberto Lisi at that time, our director, became the second violin for 3 violins. Yeah. So the third violin, I think it was for Adelina O'Brien, my classmates, at the Menuhin Academy, and she was also teaching at that time. So, but I think she had an engagement with European Youth Orchestra or something, and she couldn't do it. So at the end, the honor landed on me. So they decided to ask me to do it. So that was also actually my London debut. Yehudi took us, Yehudi Menuhin Academy, Camerata Lisi, we came to London to perform in the Royal Festival Hall, the Bach Triple Concerto. And the next day, we went to Abbey studio and recorded in the Studio One, where all the,
Yeah, famously the Beatles and
so I was
so many others.
I mean, those days I didn't know how famous, how well known this studio was. I only discovered later on, because that was just a year after I came out from China.
I love this.
Because everyone said, "Oh, you have to have a photo here." So my friend took a photo very
Everybody
quickly.
has to get this photo if you record that.
I said, "What? That ordinary door? You want the photo of there?"
Yeah, so this is what you were telling us about earlier, quite a big moment in your career when you moved to London to become his only private student, Sir Yehudi Menuhin's only private student. So is this taken in his house, or were you having a lesson here or something?
Yeah, this is normally where I have my lesson with him, and it's on the 5th floor in Chester Square, near Victoria. And I never forget the first lesson I had in his house. And he actually came down to greet me. I opened the door, and there was a Yehudi Menuhin standing there, and he said, "Come in." So I went in, and then suddenly he opened the door, and then I realized it was an elevator.
An elevator
Yes,
in his house?
Yeah. It was a little elevator, so we went in, and then he said, "Let's go up here." So we went, and then the elevator was incredibly loud and very slow. So at the end I made a joke. I said, "Maestro, your elevator needs to end in Guinness Book, the slowest and the loudest." They were laughing, all the way to the 5th floor where his studio is. And inside is amazing. The studio is full of pictures, Paganini. Yeah, so I had many, many memorable lessons, which luckily I asked his permission. May I record it? He always let me record it. So now I have one of the best archives in the world, I could say that, because nobody had the privilege to be Yehudi Menuhin's private student and record all his lessons.
So that you had another historical performance in 1997 when you recorded the Elgar Concerto with Sir Yehudi Menuhin. Why was this recording so important to you?
Number one, I think I love Elgar's music. It's one of my favorite. I think the special situation was that Yehudi Menuhin, when he was 16 years old, back in 1932, Elgar was 75 years old. And this piece was dedicated to Fritz Kreisler, one of the most famous Venetian violinists, who made a debut in London with Elgar conducting. But then somehow they didn't manage to make a recording. And then the producer said, "I've got this genius, 16 years old, Yehudi Menuhin, and I think he's the best choice." So that's how Yehudi ended up with playing the Elgar Violin Concerto, recorded with Sir Edward Elgar. So I think because of that historical connection, and in 1997, and Yehudi was invited again to perform with China National Symphony Orchestra, which just formed at that time. And after 16 years absent, I think, he hasn't been in China back. And then he asked me, "So Kun, what would you like to do?" I said, obviously he was going to conduct symphonies, and I said there's only one dream left for me, is to play the Elgar with you conducting. To have this historical performance and debut in China. It was a premiere, Chinese premiere. So we managed to give this premiere to Chinese audience, and to be in Beijing in '97. That was 2 years before Yehudi passed away.
And so then it was in the 2000s that you started conducting. So how did you go from violin to conducting?
Many people ask me this question. 2003.
2003.
Yeah, 2003. I was exactly 40 years old. So I thought, Kun, after everything I've done on the violin, prize winning, meeting great musician, working with the greatest musician, and making recordings, and all these things, and what is my next dream? I asked myself. And I thought, okay, there's another one. I want to challenge myself, which was conducting.
So the last thing I wanted to talk about is our latest project, the new story that we wrote together.
We have more coming, right?
Yes. So we listed a lot of high-profile celebrities earlier. One of them is Roger Moore, Sir Roger Moore. So how did you end up meeting James Bond?
I was touring in '85. I think after one competition, I got many engagement. So on the way back, I think it was from London, I made my debut, and then I back to Gstaad, and then my sister, at that time I brought her from China to Switzerland, and she said, Kun, there was a lady calling you, a few days ago, and said that they want to find a violin teacher, because they have seen you performing with Menuhin at the Menuhin Festival in Gstaad, and they want to study with you. I said, yeah, bring them in, So at the end we managed to meet up. So afterwards I saw this cute boy called Christian, and 12 years old. And then I said, okay, if I have time, then I'm sure I can't promise anything, but if I have time, we can work together. And then the next thing I heard was that I was invited by Christian parents and said that they want to meet you, and is it possible for you to go to their house in Gstaad? Then they picked me up and I arrived there, and then there was a gentleman standing next to a Range Rover, and of course there was story even before that, but never mind, it's all on the website. And suddenly, obviously, and he came to me, he said, you must be Kun. Who Kun? Then,
what did you say to him?
But that time I didn't know him. I watched one film, I think it was A View to Kill, just came out. I didn't know, and who is W7.
W7.
W7, at that time it was W. I didn't know English, you can say 00, you can say 00.
Yeah, 007.
What, you don't know W7? At the end I say, okay, you must be Bond, James Bond. Yeah.